Hello, English learners. Welcome to Storybook English, where thrilling stories help you learn English in a fun and engaging way. Today, we have a story full of emotion and twists. Anna's life, from tragedy to triumph. In this journey, you'll follow Anna through moments of love, loss, and immense courage. Alongside feeling the emotions of the story, you'll learn new words, expressions, and how to use them in daily conversation. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you don't miss any of our amazing stories. The phone rang in the middle of the afternoon, interrupting the sound of heavy rain outside. "Your husband had a serious car accident," they said, and at that moment, my heart stopped. Everything around me seemed to dissolve. I rushed to the hospital, each second feeling like an eternity. Everything seemed to be in slow motion. When I arrived, I found my husband unconscious, with tubes and machines around him. I held his cold hand, silently begging him to come back to me. The doctors did not have much hope, and every minute by his side was a mix of fear and despair. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law visited often, but instead of comfort, their presence brought tension. I felt that there was more than sadness in their eyes. At that time, I did not know that this tragedy would be just the beginning of a bigger nightmare, a silent betrayal that would turn my life into a battle for survival. I still remember clearly the day I met Oliver. It was a sunny afternoon, and I decided to have coffee at a cafe I didn't usually visit. There he was, with that charming smile. Our eyes met, and it felt like the world had stopped. From that moment on, we were inseparable. We got married in a simple, love-filled ceremony, with only family and close friends. Our big dream was always to have our own home. We had such a strong connection that building a home together was the natural next step. As soon as we saved enough money, we started planning the construction. My mother-in-law generously gave us a piece of family land. We accepted it with open hearts, not knowing the problems it would cause later. Building the house was a special chapter in our lives. Every brick we laid, every wall we built, was like we were building our future together. We chose everything with great care, from the type of floor to the color of the walls. It was our project, and we were very excited. However, during this time, I began to notice the first tensions with my mother-in-law. She had an opinion about everything, and always made sure to have the final say. At first, we tried to let it go, thinking it was just her way. But over time, her comments started to weigh on us. We had several arguments about the house decoration and how we should spend our money. She felt she had the right to give her opinion on everything since the land was hers. My husband and I tried to keep the peace, but it was difficult. These disagreements began to undermine our happiness. One specific incident that marked this period was during a family Christmas dinner. We were all together, and my mother-in-law started criticizing how we were managing the construction. The tension was palpable, and the atmosphere became so heavy that I left the table early. My husband tried to intervene, but it didn't help much. Finally, the house was ready, and we moved in, happy with our new home. We thought things would calm down, but little did we know that the problems were just beginning. Our relationship with my mother-in-law remained tense, and she seemed to not accept our independence. When we moved into the new house, I hoped things would calm down. But the reality was different. In the first few months, the conflicts with my mother-in-law began. She had a strong personality, and made sure to give her opinion on every detail of our lives. One of the first arguments was about the garden. I always dreamed of a garden full of flowers, but my mother-in-law had other ideas. She insisted we should plant fruit trees, saying they were more useful. I understood her logic, but it was our home, and I wanted it to reflect our dreams. This caused some heated discussions. Her visits became frequent and often intrusive. She would show up without warning, which made me very uncomfortable. My husband tried to mediate, but he always sided with her, which made me even angrier. I felt I was constantly fighting to be heard and respected in our own home. Moreover, the comparisons between me and my sister-in-law were frequent. My mother-in-law always praised her daughter for everything, from her career to her domestic skills. I, on the other hand, never seemed to measure up. This began to eat away at me, feeling like she did it on purpose to provoke me. However, I tried to ignore it, thinking it was just part of the adjustment process. But deep down, I knew these small disagreements were just the beginning of something much bigger. Every day, the tension grew. Holidays are usually a time for joy and unity for most families, but for us, they became a minefield of tensions and conflicts. Christmas, in particular, was a true test of patience and emotional endurance for everyone. That year, we decided to have Christmas dinner at our newly built house. I wanted it to be a special night, full of love and harmony. I prepared every detail with care, from the decorations to the menu, trying to create a cozy and festive atmosphere. But my mother-in-law and sister-in-law had other ideas. From the moment they arrived, the atmosphere became tense. My mother-in-law started criticizing the decorations, saying they should be more traditional, like at her house. My sister-in-law, on the other hand, did not like the food, and made sure to express her dissatisfaction loudly. We tried to keep our composure, but each of their sharp comments felt like a stab in the heart. They made sure to dismiss everything I had done. During dinner, the conflicts reached their peak. My mother-in-law reminded everyone that the land where we built the house was a gift from her, and that without her help, we would have nothing. This created a heavy atmosphere, and my husband, in an attempt to ease the tension, suggested a toast. However, instead of uniting the family, the toast highlighted even more the divisions between us. That old grump was throwing everything in our faces. I tried to ignore the provocations and keep the Christmas spirit, but the truth was that the night was ruined. With each word spoken, I felt my hope for peaceful coexistence slipping away. At the end of the dinner, when everyone was saying goodbye, I went to my room and stayed there in silence, feeling a mix of anger and indignation at the situation. The day of the accident is still fresh in my memory, as if it happened yesterday. It was a regular afternoon, and my husband had gone out to run some errands in the city. He was always careful, but that rainy afternoon brought a cruel fate. I was in the kitchen, preparing dinner, when I received the call that would change my life forever. "Your husband had a serious car accident," they said. At that moment, my heart stopped, and a sense of despair took over me. I could only think about getting to the hospital as fast as possible. When I finally arrived at the hospital, I was faced with a devastating scene. My husband was unconscious, surrounded by machines and tubes, monitoring every weak beat of his heart. I held his hand, feeling the coldness, as if life was slipping through my fingers. The doctors were honest. saying the situation was critical and that we should prepare for the worst. Each word from them was a blow to my already fragile heart. I spent days by his side in the hospital, barely sleeping, hoping for a miracle that did not seem to come. Each visit from my mother-in-law and sister-in-law was a reminder of what was to come. They were there, but not to offer support. In their eyes, there was a mix of concern and something darker, as if they were calculating their next moves in their minds. The hours in the hospital dragged on, each second feeling like an eternity. The sound of the machines and monitors became a constant background to my anguish. The medical team did their best, but his condition only worsened. I remember praying, crying, and even silently screaming, wishing I could change the fate. I talked to him, told him about our home, our memories, hoping that somehow he could hear me and fight to come back. On the day he passed away, it felt like a part of me had died too. The pain was unbearable, and the emptiness he left seemed impossible to fill. Every corner of the house we built together was now a constant reminder of everything we lost. But little did I know that this tragedy would pave the way for an even bigger struggle. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law were about to show their true intentions, and I would have to find the strength to face what was coming. The worst part was the discreet look of satisfaction on my mother-in-law's face when the doctor confirmed the death. It was a mix of genuine sadness and something else, an anticipation of what was to follow. From that moment on, my life would become a constant battle, not only for the pain of loss, but also for the betrayal that would unfold in the following days. After my husband's death, the atmosphere became even heavier. Besides the unbearable pain of the loss, I had to deal with the growing hostility from my mother-in-law and sister-in-law. They wasted no time in showing their intentions. The land where we built our house was now a matter of dispute. The first time my mother-in-law brought up the idea of taking me out of the house, I was speechless. She claimed that since the land was a gift to her son, I had no right to stay there. She said that with my husband's death, I should return everything to the family. It was as if, in her eyes, I had lost my value along with the loss of my husband. My sister-in-law, always by her mother's side, fueled these greedy ideas. She suggested that I move to a smaller apartment and leave the house for them. The feeling of injustice and betrayal was overwhelming. That house was not just a building. It was our dream, the symbol of the love and effort we put into it. Naturally, I was not going to give in easily. I sought a lawyer and started the legal battle for the property. Over the following months, the fight was arduous and exhausting. The constant visits from my mother-in-law and sister-in-law became psychological torture. They would show up without warning, looking at everything with a sense of ownership, and making malicious comments, as if they were already sure they would evict me. As the legal battle progressed, my life felt like an endless nightmare. I could barely sleep, worried about the future and the possibility of losing everything my husband and I had built together. The emotional pressure was immense, and each court hearing was a test. My mother-in-law spared no effort to try to evict me. There were many attempts at manipulation and emotional blackmail. She brought witnesses to testify against me, claiming that I had not contributed to the construction of the house. Each new attack was a blow to my already fragile emotional stability. That house was all I had left of my husband, and I was determined to fight for it, no matter the cost. The legal battle continued, and the tension was always present. But I began to realize that, even in the face of so much adversity, I was finding a strength I didn't know I had. After months of tension and legal battles, I finally managed to prove that I had contributed to the construction of the house, and therefore had the right to stay. However, this victory came with an additional challenge. The court ruled that I should reach an agreement with my mother-in-law to pay for the land where the house was built, or sell the house and share the profits. My mother-in-law, however, was determined to make my life a nightmare. She knew the land had sentimental value for me and used that against me. She demanded an exorbitant amount, knowing very well that I could not afford it. Each meeting with her was an emotional torture session, where she made it clear her goal was to see me defeated. I tried to negotiate, seeking a fair solution, but she would not budge. My sister-in-law, always by her side, made the situation worse. They wanted me to give up and leave the house, but I was determined to fight to the end. The amount my mother-in-law asked was absurd, claiming the land had sentimental value that could not be measured in money. The situation became unbearable. I had no way to raise the demanded amount, and selling the house would be equally painful. It felt like my whole world was collapsing once again, and I had nowhere to turn. However, even in the face of this new obstacle, I refused to give up. During this process, I sought support from friends and family, but the constant visits from my mother-in-law and sister-in-law and their absurd demands wore me down more each day. I was stuck in a cycle of anguish and despair, trying to find a way out that would not result in more losses. Despite all my efforts, my mother-in-law continued to be stubborn about the price of the land. She was determined to see me defeated. The court meetings were emotional and seemed never-ending. I tried every possible way to find a fair solution, but nothing was enough. I felt like I was fighting a losing battle. During this chaos, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law had a trip planned to handle a family matter in another state. I am not sure of the real reason for the trip, but I believe they were plotting something to destroy me. Little did they know that this trip would change everything drastically. Just a few minutes after takeoff, the plane had a mechanical failure and crashed, killing all 173 people on board, including my mother-in-law and sister-in-law. The news was a shock. Despite all the conflict and bitterness, I never wished them harm. However, I could not help but feel a mix of relief and sadness. The newspapers reported the accident for days, and investigations pointed to a technical failure in the aircraft. It was a tragic event, and the whole country was in mourning for the lost lives. I couldn't stop thinking about what this meant for me. The justice I had fought so hard for came in a way I could never have imagined. With their tragic end, the court case was closed, and I finally had the peace I had been seeking. The constant pressure and threats were over, but at a terrible price, with all those lives lost. In time, I began to reflect on everything that had happened. I wasn't sure if this was a lesson, destiny, or punishment. I never wished for their deaths, but I felt relieved that my nightmare was over. Life went on, and I learned to deal with the pain and loss more lightly. That tragedy brought a strange form of peace. I could finally move on without the constant weight of the battle for my home. The twist in fate showed that sometimes life has mysterious ways of resolving conflicts. I hope you enjoyed today's story about Anna and her incredible journey. In this video, we learned new words and expressions, and saw how to use adjectives and construct sentences naturally. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to check out our other videos to continue learning and practicing. Click now to watch another video and continue your English learning adventure